I'm going to row the ocean alone. Would you like to make a little video about it? And so begins the story of Row of Life, this innocuous little message that is the greatest understatement of all time.
I hit on gold here. So, I want to start this little journey that we're going to go on with the book Adrift.
Okay.
Does this book have any significance to you?
You're so good at doing your homework. Yes, this book has immense significance. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, very far from the ocean. Maybe millions of years ago, it was underwater, but it's not the case in my lifetime. And the summers were really brutal. And part of my experiment in transportation was reading a lot of books that had to do with ocean adventure. So a major part of my lexicon are these kinds of stories. And when I was quite young, I would say 13-ish, Adrift was something my mom recommended to me, and I didn't need a lot of convincing. And it's this absolutely unbelievable account of a man, Stephen Callahan, who has a shipwreck. I think a whale hits his boat, and he spends 76 days adrift, living in a life raft, and slowly inches across the Atlantic Ocean, but takes extremely detailed account on a daily basis of how he is managing to survive, and the odds just continue to get stacked against him. It's one of the most breathtaking accounts of how someone is able to engineer that many solutions. Also so beautiful, his accounts of his relationship with the Dorado fish. I don't know if you've read it, but
I have not, but I have but that one tipped me over the line because I've heard from many friends that I need to read it. Okay.
Definitely. And it's gorgeous. It's spiritual in all the right ways. It's practical. It's just an amazing, amazing book. And I think that book, along with several others, planted this very profound seed in my psyche about, first of all, I heavily romanticized any type of survival at sea story. I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
It is the coolest thing ever.
Well, yes, until you're caught in a story where you're dealing with it.
Yeah. You're not out there thinking this is cool.
Yes, exactly.
Type 2 fun.
Until shit hits the fan, it's really cool. But yeah, it just definitely laid the foundation for me being obsessed with this idea of living at sea. And I, as a result, when I moved to California for school, I knew I was going to do this study abroad program early in my film school experience that was not, how do I put this? My school, USC, was not going to accept credit for me to do it, but I knew I was going to do it anyway because you got to live on a sailboat, and that was just too dang cool. So it was because of Adrift and all of this that it planted this seed of obsession for me to become a sailor one day and learn what it would be like to live at sea. And I did have that experience. I lived on a boat for about 3 months in the Caribbean. We were researching climate change and the legacy of colonialism. And much came after that as well. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I wound up...
I hit on gold here.
Yeah, you did. This book is definitely like a major turning point for me. In that experience of living on the sailboat, I was not only a sailor and a student, and it was a very academically rigorous program to be a part of, but also I wore my filmmaking cap, and I was making a documentary about our experience. There were 20 students, all under the age of like 25, living on this boat, and I was documenting our transition, what we were going through, as people, as individuals, experiencing this really profound, obviously a connection to nature, but just really personal confrontation with ourselves in this extreme environment. And that wound up making a 20-minute short film. I don't think it's the best thing I've ever made, but I made it, and it was hard to do.
Thank God, if you thought that was the best thing you've ever done.
No, it's
early on. I
don't think it's that good.
Peaked early.
But it's very sweet that people continue to compliment me for it. But whatever happened of that, it wound up touring sailing clubs. And literally the one screening I didn't go to was in Long Beach. And lo and behold, a woman named Angela Madsen went to that screening and contacted me via Facebook message. And she said, hey, I watched your film at this thing, yada yada. I'm going to row the ocean alone. Would you like to make a little video about it? And so begins the story of Row of Life, this innocuous little message that is the greatest understatement of all time.
Wow.
But yeah, it can literally be traced back to that very book Adrift.
Holy shit. Yep. That's amazing. Yep. And what prompted you to make the little documentary about the students out there? What do you think it was? Because you're obviously working hard just to keep up with your scholastic endeavors. Like, what was it that what was the itch?
Yeah, I think, I was in school to become a filmmaker, and I felt like I didn't have a lot of those types of films that I was dying to make and live. Part of the attraction, too, was this vision of myself as a documentary filmmaker in the high seas and, living the lifestyle of it all, right? Those are the perks of the job. You're not making any money, so you might as well get a cool adventure out of it.
For sure,
So for me,
romanticize it.
Third year of college, and I'm like, I just don't want to make another film school film. I want to do something that speaks to this sense of adventure that I really have. And that was a part of the equation from the get-go, that I knew I was going to in some way document this experience. I just didn't know what exactly it was going to be about until really it unfolded, which is typical with documentaries.
Sure. So do you, this idea of how an environment changes people and this early attraction to how extreme environments like the ocean changes people's psyche. Do you remember when you first had that aha moment? Was there a little kid experience or anything that because that concept hits people at different times in their lives, but sometimes much later.
Totally. No, that's a great question. In the case of this film, I wasn't adamant, but I thought that going into it, I was going to do, what I wanted to do was specifically explore climate resilience in each island we were going to. So I started with Puerto Rico, which was just after Irma and Maria, and I worked with Waves for Water, and I was fascinated by how the Puerto Rican people, to begin with, are the most resilient, resourceful,
Did
brilliant.
You work with John Rose?
John and Otto.
Awesome.
My God. Yeah. I mean, it all connects. Isn't it so funny? But so I thought it was going to be a lot of hobbled together problem solving, this and that. And I kept running against the wall of every time we're sailing or every time we get to land, I don't have enough time at any of these port stops to generate the depth of relationship that really, it is necessary to construct these kinds of, stories. And my aha moment was when I realized, oh my gosh, well, the people I have the most access to are my shipmates. And not only that, but I have learned in storytelling that an arc tends to follow the leading character is the person who changes the most. Not always, but often. And without question, before my very eyes, myself and my shipmates, we were changing a lot. We were going through intense withdrawal of sleep, really strict watch routines, and doing work, physical labor that many people had not been exposed to before. That was grueling and really hard. We were many people were not scientists and having to do really, really in-depth research on microbes and whatever the heck was getting pulled in the noose and tow. And, it was just so much of it was about being outside of your comfort zone and how you respond to that, that it was just obvious that that's where the lens needed to be pointed after a certain point of time.
Sure. You're a professional storyteller, and I think that for people who are not professional storytellers, they might just think stories just kind of take place and they unfold. And I think that to a certain extent, they do, but there's also an element of crafting. Totally. And there's you're talking about characters, right? Real people become characters in stories, and it's your job to do their character justice and have it be true, and also make it something that's not boring to watch.
Yes.
Because a storyteller's
good summary of the job.
greatest fear is that shit gets boring.
Yes.
And one aspect that you just said that I think is just underappreciated in storytelling is the importance of access. Mm-hmm. Like we tend to romanticize, like, well, I had to tell the story. And I could have to tell a story in Ghana, but that's going to take a plane flight to Ghana every time that I want to go there for this story. And it just might not be feasible in the end. And just the logistical aspect of what you have access to, I think is often a really good question to start with, because you can find the meaning through virtually anything if you give it enough time and love and care. But what you can't always have is the access.
Totally. I mean, you just telling me earlier about this story with your parents, you know, it's
I have access to the characters.
It is. You have access, you have relevance, you have a personal motivator in that, like, because so much of it has to be, there needs to be something intrinsic that pushes you. And I think those personal relationships contain tremendous value over time. But I also think it is a dance, and it's a 50-50 energy give take, where that person has to equally be leaning into you as much. This doesn't work unless people participate, you know, and opt to share. I think stories are these profoundly precious things that we own, and for someone to give you access to theirs, to them, that's no small thing at all, and that needs to be recognized and really properly protected. I think in the process, it really depends. I mean, sometimes people pick the most extreme and intense, dark things to go. Sometimes it's funny and lighthearted, and that's great, but either way, it has to be this, like, both ways permission slip. Yes, you can come in, and can I come in? You know, I'm going to go here, I'm going to look over here, in this transparent process throughout. But yeah, it's a 50% relationship at all times
between the storyteller and the characters.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And on top of that, if you have someone who's too enthusiastic, it's probably not a good story.
Yeah,
because they're just looking to get famous.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, who knows? It's a lot of. I think Angela was extremely enthusiastic about me coming on board, and I was ambivalent at first because I was like, "What? How are you not?" When I remember when I Googled her, I was like, "This person seems pretty important. Like, why is she coming to me? I'm just a little recent graduate from film school. I have no idea." I mean, she's got to have access to, like, higher end filmmakers.
Right. She had already accomplished a lot.
Totally. And so I was a little bit confused, honestly, why she was so, but I don't know. She had something in her mind that I just didn't. I wish, you know, that I could get more clarity on now. Sure.
So you looked her up, and what did you see when you first looked this woman up?
So I first saw that she was a Olympic athlete, and I was immediately impressed by that. I saw that she had gone to the Olympics 3 times in Beijing, Rio, and London, and she had won a bronze medal. I cannot remember which. She'd competed in shot put and javelin and rowing.
All paraplegic.
Yes, and that's the kicker. She was also a paraplegic, and I was like, this woman obviously is this Renaissance athlete. I mean, this incredible upper body strength. And now and then of course, as I kept reading, I learned she had this formidable career as an ocean rower as well. She had set a number of world records, I think 14. So no, she was someone who really knew what they were doing. I think when I first got that message from her, immediately the red flag was like, is this person just a kook who's showing up and knocking on my door and wants attention? Exactly. But no, it was quite the opposite. The minute I started looking into her, she had every accolade that you would want someone to have if they're going to go do this.
Right. Yeah. What was the first film that you made? The one on the ship?
That one's called Where the Water Takes Us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you think were elements of that story that made it work? What do you think drew her to it? Like, so she saw this, you weren't at the screening, she saw the screening.
Yeah.
That led to this huge thing that you're doing now.
Yeah.
And I just, we're going to get to the huge thing, but these little breadcrumbs beforehand,
it's so
these small decisions, I'm really interested in that.
Well, I can't fully answer that for her, but what I hope is, I think visually it's very beautiful. I think, I have a specific lens at which I look at the ocean, this gorgeous, endless muse. And I think and know on many levels, Angela and I had a tremendous common ground of us, of a reverence for this body of water. And so I think I captured it in such a way, and I would imagine that may have, landed for her appropriately. I think there's a levity to it. There's a lot of humor in all the chaos, and that's part of my personality.
She's funny too.
She's cracks me up.
Yeah.
So I think
military people are fucking funny.
Oh my God. Yeah, because you have to, it's like, it's the tragedy is the comedy, you know? And, so I think the humor, I think the comedy, and then I think also more than anything, I think she knew I had the exposure to life at sea, which is a very specific, combinations of events that you live through. And I think she knew I was able to empathize with that experience, and that I did get seasick, but I could move through it, and I could shoot on a moving vessel. And there was just a lot of practical reasons I think that maybe she saw. But from a storytelling perspective, I mean, I don't totally know. I would love to know the answer to that from her.
Do you think you're tough?
Am I tough?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Like, do you think, because she's very tough. Like,
Sure.
I would imagine that she would not call you, or if she was like,
Sure.
this girl's not going to be able to hang.
Yeah, I think that's part of it for sure. I think she thought I could hang. Am I tough? I can endure a lot. I think I falter. I think I puke over the guardrails pretty quickly, but no, I definitely can muscle through a lot of discomfort. So yeah, if that's toughness,
okay,
I'll give it to myself.
So, documentary, feature-length documentary, huge endeavor. Yeah. You were first pitched as a little video, your words.
Angela's words.
Angela's words, excuse me. A little video about her story. What were the next steps in that endeavor? Because I think what I'm getting at here is it's really easy to jump into the wrong story. Yeah. And then you're like 6 months in and you have sunk cost fallacy. Sure. And you're like, oh God, whether this is a doc, it's a book, it's what any huge endeavor, right? Like, were you careful before committing? What were the steps that you took to decide that you were going to go all in and dedicate years of your life to creating this thing? What was that kind of very pre-production aspect like?
Another great question. I right away didn't want to do it. When Angela asked me, I was interested in the story fundamentally because it checks all the boxes of things I really like, but I just knew I wasn't the right person for it at the time. I had just come off of my senior year in film school where Free Solo won the Academy Award, and the documentary world was finally looking at adventure and sports filmmaking with a lot more credibility. And here I had this person who was aiming to achieve an equally audacious, near impossible feat of crossing an ocean alone and unassisted. And she was unlike any protagonist I had seen ever in these films that I, religiously watched, all the climbing things, anything. Here's a, 60-year-old, overweight, paraplegic, super out gay, like very crude, inappropriate sense of humor. I mean, all the things that you'd never add into the soup of a person, she had it all. And something about that was incredibly alluring to me.
She'd kick out Alex Honnold's ass.
Oh my gosh, probably. And then make a hilarious joke about it and everyone would be friends. But so there was something about Angela specifically that I wasn't so sure about the film, but I just liked her. And I was like, I don't know if I want to make this, but I just want to still be your friend and like root for you through this process. So it started with me saying, look, I don't know that I am ultimately the right filmmaker for you, but I'd love to help you figure out who the right people are to get in touch with. And she said, sure, why don't you come down to Long Beach? Deb, her partner, is out of town. I'll show you the boat. We'll walk through everything. So I drove down to Long Beach, had the best day ever. We ended the night like drinking beer in her hot tub, and it was just like so cool to hang out with her. And
how old were you at the time?
I was 22.
Wow.
I mean, I was like a baby out of school. This is like a month after I graduated. And I was waitressing part-time. I was cleaning people's boats part-time. I was working at the farmer's market part-time. I was just hobbling together a living. And Angela said to me, I think it was that evening, and she said, what do I have to do to get you to work with me full time? And I was like, well, I'm just torn a lot of different directions. I'm applying for jobs right now. I don't know what I'm doing next in life. And she said, what if I pay your next 2 months rent? Key to the story. And I thought, that sounds pretty good, actually. That eliminates a huge stressor for me right now. And yeah, I could totally drive down several days a week and film with you and just capture verite and us hang out. So she did exactly that. My rent wasn't anything too crazy, but it really made such a big difference. And for her, it was, I wasn't earning any kind of salary doing this, and we had no budget. It was just my gear that I owned personally. So from there, we were able to hobble together a 5-minute sizzle on what it was. And then with that sizzle, I was confident we were going to get some attention for her from Yetis and Patagonias. I thought it would make a great 20-minute branded thing in the meantime as like an interim piece. And then eventually when it needed to grow up and be a big film, then it could do that thing. So we got a nonprofit sponsorship, got some money from that, got a crowdfunding campaign going shortly thereafter. I was able to onboard a little bit more crew. I mean, very gradually it grew, nothing crazy.
What was the nonprofit?
It's called Angel City Sports. They're based here in LA, and it's an amazing nonprofit that Angela worked very closely with, focused on adaptive athletes. Okay. So they just sent, 30 athletes to the Paralympics last summer, and many placed gold, and they're just kicking ass.
Right. So you were able to write a proposal to them, show them the sizzle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they partnered as our nonprofit partner on the film.
Great. Yeah. We're going to talk more about the sizzle.
Sure. Yeah.
Because so many storytellers and documentary filmmakers get stuck because they're just like, I don't have the money. I don't know how to go get the money. And for you to take this project in stages and take money in stages is something that I want to dig into a little bit more, because that projects die if you can't pay your rent. Right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
And so when it comes, I think that when you can produce a single asset like that sizzle, it can have this compounding value effect. Yeah. Right? Like there can be single things that you make that maybe only take you a week or two to make that then last for a really long time.
100%.
And it sounds like that sizzle was that thing. Yeah. So, what did that sizzle consist of? How did you go about making it? And I'm gonna, so let's just, because you're shooting this all yourself, right? Yep. So describe what a day down there with Angela would look like to come across, to get the sizzle, and what you were going for when you were trying to make this sizzle.
It's an excellent question. I wish I remembered a little more specifically what's in the sizzle right now, but it's a day with Angela. I'd show up. Her house is usually kind of a mess with something going on. She always had a project going on. So for example, if it was a day that she was vacuum sealing food to put in the boat to store it, then she would be busy with that project, and there'd be snacks everywhere, and I'd just fire up the camera. And Angela is so intuitive on camera. That was another thing, is it's rare you meet someone who translates to 2 dimensions so cleanly and like isn't weird about it, and just was made for the camera.
She knows what you need.
She knew exactly. It was very effortless. We were in a choreography together that felt immediate. So yeah, I'd be documenting whatever this project was. And so just everything she did was harder for her by virtue of being a paraplegic. So like oh shit, I forgot this in the car. Let me go out to get it. There's a 5-minute commute
right.
from her kitchen table to the driveway of just maneuvering all of that. And so all of those little moments that we take for granted, I was very curious to document, this is what adds up. And she's just very lovely. I mean, she's a good narrator of things, but she also knows when to be quiet. So a lot of that was capturing what it feels like to be around her personality. And then at one point we did an overnight row to Catalina Island together, which is the most seasick I have ever been in my whole life. Puked 9 times. She got Thai curry pizza before we left. I mean, just mean. That was so mean.
She wanted to see if you could hang for the real thing.
Exactly. But that was proved amazing footage for the sizzle because you have to give people a sense of what is this going to actually be when you're out in your little spaceship in the water. So yeah, we had, I think, if I'm thinking correctly, the sizzle, it was get to know Angela, give people a sense of why they should love her as much as I love her, demonstrate why her being a paraplegic is this added variable of difficulty, and illustrate what ocean rowing is. So it was like those 3 things I remember being really specific goals. And then once I felt like we had enough to go off of it, I mean, it was a 5-minute video. It just kind of pieced together with some nice music and a couple good catchy lines of Angela here and there, and boom, that's that. Like, you really have to get your point across very cleanly and very quickly. And you're right, it is, you cannot get something made without a sizzle. Or I don't know of something that's gotten made without a sizzle. It not only proves to you that you have a film there as the filmmaker, but it proves to other people that your filmmaking technique is of a capability to convey this appropriately. So yeah, it's essential in the process.
Okay. So did you edit the sizzle?
I did.
Okay. So you edited it.
Yep.
It has all these little components in it.
Yep.
And through that process, Angela's one of the best characters on camera that I've ever seen in a documentary film.
Yeah.
Like, you could have been way worse at storytelling and this thing probably still would have worked. Like, when I was watching this thing the other night, I was like, oh my God, like, it's just she's such a fucking good character.
Yeah, totally.
That she's just like like, you just want to keep seeing her exist, like, and do the things that she's doing. And was it during that point that you're like, okay, if I get the money to make this thing, I'm totally down? When was there a moment where it switched for you from ambivalent to excitement?
I think it was when we got Angel City Sports and that first chunk of money, because then I was like, oh my God, it's happening. This is not just this invisible thing. You feel the validation, and but at this point we've nurtured, a friendship over a couple months, and I'm too hooked to go anywhere now. Like, I have to see what happens next. And so for me, it was, okay, I'm in, I'll be your filmmaker. I'm not going to make a feature, but, a good 20 to 30 minute thing that's going to really get the point across. We're going to make this really good. So, that was it.
Okay. So you got the first chunk.
Yep.
I'm going to keep on this money track for a moment, because people never
important.
Talk about it.
Totally.
How Surfers Get Paid, one of the best shows on Stab. I don't know if you've ever seen this.
Yes.
So good.
I have.
But it's real, right? It's like why more creators don't get to create.
Yeah, we have to demystify how this really works.
Totally.
100%.
So what was the next chunk that you were able to get to have this thing come along?
Okay, so I think it was $5,000 from Angel City Sports. I think we got another 2 to 3 from another nonprofit called the Paralyzed Veterans Association. And also, Angela had personal connections with these. So that does move the needle a lot. I feel like it may have been a couple other private donations. We're still talking in the low thousands here, nothing crazy. And then we did a crowdfunding campaign that got another $10K-ish. So by the time she was about ready to launch, I think we had earned just shy of like $20K. And that was a lot of money for me at the time to do a documentary when you have amazing friends with top tier talent from film school,
and
you
you're
own
22.
all your own gear. It's like, great, we got
Yeah.
money in the bank. We can do this. Let's order t-shirts next.
Yeah.
Wait to do the
Throwing
t-shirts.
a party. Yeah. Yeah. When you're 22,
Always wait to do the
when you're
t-shirts.
22, $20,000 is $1 million.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You
You're
can
like
make that go so far.
$20,000? That's $1 million.
I still don't know how people's films cost that much. People tell me it costs them $1 million plus to make something. I'm like, what the hell did you spend that on? It's staggering to me.
Right.
But so about that amount, and that probably would have done it. I mean, we would have tried to raise a little bit more after her row for post-production and
Sure.
music and all that. But at that point, my hope was, okay, if Angela's gonna do this, she's gonna pull it off. This is gonna be, now we got to work PR. We got to really make sure there's a lot of good, meaningful press attention on this, because that's what I can bring into a Yeti or a Patagonia or a brand. Hold on, rewind. Another very important thing that I learned to do is those brand relationships. So I got a lot of sponsorships. You cannot underestimate the power of swag. So Avasol sunscreen, Chris, very dear friend of mine, gave us God knows how much sunscreen that we were able to raffle off and like do little prizes, and Aloha bags, Garmin, Iridium. I cannot even think, Kaloa rum. Like the list goes on. We hit up every brand possible. Of course, we're asking for money, but very rarely are they going to give you money. So happily, we will accept any kind of donations. Hydro Flask gave us like 300 bottles. I mean, this was really useful for us to run a crowdfunding campaign. And it helps elevate your project a bit too when you can create those brand connections, and it opens the door for, okay, when Angela gets across the ocean, I'm going to come back to Hydro Flask and see, are they available to help me co-produce this film now, and so on and so forth. So you just start to creak the door open at as many possible relevant companies. I think brand support is still to this day one of the most relevant ways to get financing for any creative endeavor.
And Angela's living in Los Angeles?
In Long Beach, yes.
In Long Beach. And you're in Santa Barbara.
I was living in LA at the time, actually. I was in Marina Del Rey.
Easy.
Yeah, easy. Yeah.
So you're right there, right?
Yeah,
Going back to the access. Like it's cheap for you.
Totally. 30-minute drive.
Drive across town. You're there. You can shoot for a day.
Totally.
And were there things that you were then kind of getting into this process of, okay, we're going to make this bigger film. We need to expand certain sections of it. How did you go about thinking? Because it's a, I don't want to say a totally different skill set, but it's a deeper skill set to be able to entertain someone for 20 minutes or an hour than it is to entertain someone for 5 minutes.
Sure.
So in your brain as a filmmaker, how are you thinking, okay, well, we have this really cool little story here.
Yeah.
Were you then journaling or writing? Like these are aspects of the story that I want to go, because it's a really, I think the doc is it's like an hour and 20, something like that.
Yep.
It's really tight.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the strongest aspects of it. It's like there's not much wasted space, and you're moving us right along. I fucking hate it when docs are good and then they're just like,
I know.
And 2.5 hours in,
yes,
there was a nephew that had no relevance to the story, but we wanted to get him to
There's
say
a lot of fat.
the same thing that the other ones said.
Yes.
Yeah, I just appreciate how quickly it was moving. And I think that I would bet that comes from you having a lot of extra stuff that then you could cut down to the most essential parts.
Yeah.
I want to just ask you, like, so before you're going out to, maybe spend a day with Angela, or as you're crafting this story in your head of, okay, how can we expand this? What did it look like for you to expand that story? Would you do writing sessions and be like, what's interesting to me about this? Were there questions that you would prompt yourself with? Were there people that you would talk to? Like, what does it actually look like to expand a story?
Amazing. Thank you for asking this. I got really lucky on this one because I had a pretty important document, which is Angela's memoir. She wrote a book called Rowing Against the Wind, which was essentially her entire backstory from when she grew up as a young girl in Xenia, Ohio, and knew she was gay when she was 5, but kept it a secret, and grew up in this really tough, all boys, macho Americana military family. You know, there was a lot of information around what makes an Angela Madsen. How does one become this incredible person? And I had all of this the primary source of it all. Of course, I was there in front of her all the time, but it's different when someone summarizes their own life story. So because, you know, I think I have this storytelling background and this obsession with, you know, seafaring and these adventurers, to me, we have something, you know, you have an A plot and you have a B plot. So an A plot is sort of this superficial, you know, at face value what the story is about. Does paraplegic woman get from point A to point B? Great. That's a pretty quantifiable, you know, measurement of does your story deliver, you know, this outcome of the arc. But the B plot is, well, why the hell does she need to do this? What is going on inside of this person's mind and soul that is propelling them to do something so extreme? Nobody's asking this of them, but they're insistent that this has to be done. This is part of their life destiny, whatever. So my homework, it was to really dive into the like psychoanalysis of Angela and understand her and why she was making the decisions she's making. It's the same thing if you're writing a scripted film, where you have to understand the subtext of every sentence your character, the dialogue of a character is saying. Why are they saying that? Where does this come from? What is the origin story here? In documentary, there's no difference. It's just a real person in front of you. So a lot of that was deconstructing her, what I believe to be her motivations for things. So when it came time to expand the story, it said, okay, we knew the A plot, we were going to hit these major Angela's preparation, you know, launching night, life at sea, obstacles at sea, arrival to Hawaii, hopefully. But underneath that all, I am a huge fan of stories that are not told entirely chronologically. Where do we squeak in these very intentional incisions in the plot that are going to deepen your relationship with this character and your understanding of what it is that is pushing her to do this? And so in that case, learning about her, why she became a paraplegic at age 33, what that unraveling of her life was, how she was able to refine sports and find herself again, you know, very, very, very important and deeply relevant to what's pushing her. Because when you're alone on a boat in the middle of the ocean, stroking your oars for 1,000,000 times, something has got to be gnawing at you to do this. That's much deeper than an accolade or validation from the New York Times. It's profound. And so that was the homework is, okay, let's really, and of course I don't do this in a vacuum. I mean, my house where I was living at the time, there were 1,000,000 index cards on the wall, and like you throw your ideas literally around you so you can see them. But I have a crew of people that I'm constantly collaborating with and referencing, and even Angela. I mean, I think you figure out that relationship with your participant, and to what extent they should be invited in the process. But in her case, she was so self-aware already that it was really important for me to bounce ideas off of her of, what do you think if we include this to this amount? And she was also, because I did include her in the process to that extent, she also asked that I not include what I thought to be extremely pertinent information about her daughter, her only child, passing away the year before her row. Which, yes, you're surprised. She asked me not to include that in the film, and per that respect, I don't. But I mean, my God, is that not an important detail of what's driving someone to go be alone at sea for 100 days, you know? So, yeah, I think you have to decide as the storyteller what ethical boundary makes sense to walk, because that was such a clear line for her. I was not going to overstep it. It would have crumbled the whole operation. Right. But so yeah, you got to look somewhere else. Okay, what else can we talk about that feels okay to put here?
Sure. I know a very prolific writer who ghost writes a lot of really big bestsellers, and he once said, if I'm speaking with my subject and they say, okay, well, I don't want you to put this thing in there, I say, okay, but we need to find something equally as good.
Yeah, exactly.
Which you did, right? Like there are these other aspects where you're like, fuck, like this is, I mean, I won't give it, but the homeless at Disneyland thing, fuck. It's kind of,
I know.
There were a few moments that I think it kept a story very surprising. And you don't want people to be able to predict where things are going too quickly.
Totally.
So I think you had enough good material there.
Totally.
That it worked. Yeah. I mean, also like, I don't know if you read much of Joan Didion's work.
I love Joan.
She wrote The Year of Magical Thinking. Yeah. And then a year short. So The Year of Magical Thinking is a book about grief, and it's about losing her husband, and basically it's the best portrait of the psychology of grief that maybe has ever been told. And she talks about how what you're expected to go through in grief is this kind of linear path of denial to accept it, but he's like, everything just shatters apart, and there's nothing clean about grief. And I believe it was about a year after she wrote that book, her daughter died. Yep. And her agent apparently was like, well, you need to include the daughter. Or I think it was while she was still writing the book, her daughter died. And she said, no, this book is about this period of time. And I could write another one about that. But there's, I think, something strange for storytellers to grapple with, which is you tell a story about a specific time period, but then probably if it's a book or a doc, it could be a couple years after that, that you're still editing or doing post-production, and a lot of other things are going to happen during that time that you need to you kind of need to decide where that cutoff line is going to be for that story, even if new things are going to happen after the fact. And it's, I think outside of it, you're not really thinking about how, like, where that cutoff line to the story is, because life keeps going. But you need to pick that line and have the story be self-contained.
100%. I love the sentence. I think I'm saying this correctly, but truth is subtraction. It is. It's just COVID happened during Angela. She was just about to leave, and then everything goes on lockdown. I mean, huge part in the story, which of course we're filming like crazy, and then of course the Black Lives Matter movement here in LA, and there's this revolution happening here on land while Angela is inchworming her way across the Pacific Ocean, and we're like, wow, that's a hell of a juxtaposition. Like, of course we need to include this in the film and document it, and we have terabytes of footage with all of that. Doesn't make it into the film, because ultimately when we got there, to sit down and tell this story, and it takes a million iterations to find it, but you just continue to ask yourself, what am I trying to say? What is the purpose of this specific story? What is the message that needs to get carried from beginning to end and be extremely clear? And it took us a very long time to find it. But we knew that adding COVID and Black Lives Matter and whatever else popped up was just like with Joan Didion, probably, even though I do think she writes about her daughter a little bit in it. But yeah, to your point, yes, like you own the work. I mean, it's your choice. You know what what is permitted in and out of the door of the process of the storytelling. And in this case, it just needed to be about something so specific.
You mentioned that you had index cards, and that you had collaborators. One of my favorite things to do is kind of bust the myth of the solo genius.
Oh yeah.
I just don't think it's there's talent. But talent often rises on the shoulders of a bunch of other people.
For sure.
And good ideas are rarely a solo endeavor. Like, you can't really take credit for your ideas. You can take credit for, like, I drove over to her house every day and did the work to make it happen, but like that I think Steven Spielberg he's like, some of my best ideas are not my own.
No, it's true.
I just, Chris Rock, he's like, I surround myself with good writers like rappers surround themselves with chains. Like, the smartest storytellers are just surrounding themselves with people who can offer great insight.
Yep.
So who's your crew and what do they offer you?
My editor, Joseph, is one of my dear friends from USC Film School. We met in line to the screening of Free Solo, if that bodes well. And we started chatting. He wound up editing Where the Water Takes Us, my sailing documentary, for me. So that was the first time we collaborated. And I knew we worked together really well. And he equally is obsessed with the sports, adventure genre. So we just really collided forces in that way. And he'll be a collaborator, I hope, for the rest of my career. I love him dearly. And he was an essential part of Row of Life and bouncing ideas off of. What the director's role is to make decisions. You have to hear everybody out and get a lot of opinions constantly, and opinions you disagree with, you totally agree with, fall in the middle, whatever. And then you have to make a decision, and it has to be clearly communicated to everyone else. So it doesn't, when it comes to the idea, many decisions are not my idea, but I just get to be the person who makes the final one. So Joseph, another collaborator, Ruhi, who is a producer who also went to USC with me, had a DP that was really great. And she became really close with both Deb and Angela, and that it's just wonderful when you have a crew that meshes well in the room with everyone. It just creates a sense of safety for the participants to really be themselves. And the solo genius, I am the solo dummy. I swear just cannot figure. I immediately call Joseph when I'm stuck. And then once we start talking, I'm like, okay, wait, I know where I am, and we can get through it together. But yeah, it's 100% a collaborative team sport. Filmmaking is. There's no way you can do it alone.
One of my favorite lines in the doc, right? Like you're talking about what the why, the B plot, what drives someone to go out and do this, and I love it when the answer is so obvious, because Angela at one point in the doc said, "I didn't need to be in my chair anymore." I feel like, fucking, of course.
Yes.
You get to be out on the ocean. Yeah. Of course you don't want to be in your wheelchair all the time.
Totally.
And
people can't tell.
Yeah.
You're in camouflage, right? When you're sitting in a rowing seat, nobody knows if you're paraplegic or not. Everyone looks the same when they're sitting down on a rowing seat. And she loved that deception of it all, because she didn't get pigeonholed as a certain person or a certain type of athlete. And I remember she had done many rows with crews of 16, 8, and she was the skipper, and never felt like, because I asked her many times, why alone? Why do you have to, what is it about doing this solo that you have to prove? And she said, because I never felt like I got enough credit when there were other able-bodied people in the boat. She said it was always able-bodied people, plus disabled women do. And it's crazy. She's lifting more of the weight a lot of the time than most people.
So there is someone in I don't know if it was Roz Savage or someone who's talking about the mechanics of rowing paraplegic. So how does that work? Because for people who have rowing machines, you're using your legs when you're rowing. So how is she mechanically doing it?
So Angela, I should really pull it up. She had moderate movement. She couldn't feel anything, no sensation whatsoever. It's a specific L1 something. I can't remember the technical term of it. But you'll see, that scene where she's kind of getting in the boat. Like, it's confusing because you're like, wait, she's moving her leg, but she's physically lifting it, and she can technically force it into doing the movement. There's just no sensory clue that anything's going on there. So in her case, her rowing seat, there was some kind of way where she was able to scoot her butt and prioritize the movement with her core and her upper body. But I mean, just pure muscle from here up. She was just so freaking strong. But yeah, her she could force her legs into the shape of doing the, push in, push out, because she could move it that much, I guess. There was just no brain signal sent there. And
for people who haven't seen the doc, what did her boat what's the proper term for it?
Oh, an ocean rowing boat.
Ocean rowing boat. Yeah. What did this look like?
So an ocean rowing boat, this one in particular, it's called Row of Life. It's
also the name of the documentary.
Also the name of the documentary. It's a 20-foot long, I call it a spaceship. I mean, it looks like a really funny spaceship. It has 2 cabins on the bow and the aft on the stern. And then in the center is the rowing seat. So underneath the rowing seat is where all the dry storage is. So for example, her water, her food. The front bunk has a lot of gear like heavy weather jackets and any type of other equipment she needs. And then the back cabin is where she would sleep. So it's 2 hours on, 2 hours off constantly in a 24-hour cycle. So she would be out rowing. You have 2 sets of oars always as a backup in case something happens. You've got solar panels and all sorts of gadgets and gizmos and GPS and Garmin this and whatever that. And a desalinator on board. So that's how she was able to drink fresh water. I'm trying to think what else. But no motor, no sail. There's something called a parachute anchor, which is what it sounds like, a parachute that you deploy underwater, and it essentially scoops up enough water that it adheres the boat to the surface of the sea in the context of very high winds or big waves. So it will make sure you don't get flipped over or lifted, 20 feet into the air and then slam down.
Slows you down also if you're going to sleep. So while you're sleeping, you're not rowing. And if the wind is blowing against you, you don't want to just lose all the ground you gained.
Exactly. Yep. Ocean rowing boat. So this one was an incredible boat engineered by a New Zealand guy. And it had this incredible self-righting. I mean, they all technically have a self-righting capability, but you just hope it actually works when you need it. And in this case, this one really did work. Angela said she got rolled in a 50-foot wave off the coast of Australia once, which is very hard for me to conceptualize that because holy shit, that must be so scary in a tiny little pod like that.
Yeah.
And to also just the weight of the wave, not crushing the boat. I just don't even understand. But yeah, she said she rolled 3 times and it popped right back up. So yeah.
A lot of people probably think you're being hyperbolic
no,
here.
No,
like,
not
right?
even
like,
close.
50-foot wave. Like she doesn't know what he's talking about.
No.
The thing is, in the middle of the ocean,
it's fucked
shit
up.
gets like that. Like you can be at the center of those goddamn storms that reach you thousands of miles away and make the biggest day of surfing that you've had over the year. Like there's that scene in The Perfect Storm.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Where
100%.
they're just trying to motor up this swell.
Yeah.
And it's just an ongoing, oh my God, it's so terrifying.
I know. It's like my worst nightmare. I feel like my permanent worst nightmare is paddling out, barely scraping over the lip of what already feels like an enormous wave to just have your heart sink because there's a 200-foot wave behind it. Like that is the recurring nightmare of my life. And it happens. I mean, I watched this video just the other night of the tsunami in 2011, the Japanese tsunami. There's a ship out in the ocean that recorded it. Did you see? I'm going to send this to you.
I haven't seen this.
It's so fucked up. It's like the interstellar wave. It's exactly that. You're like, why is the horizon suddenly navy blue? And it's unbelievably stressful, and it's just not breaking, and it's this wall of water.
Yeah.
And they don't break,
but you can. They don't break, but you can roll down them.
No, it's just I'm obsessed with it, but it's so fucked up. So I don't know. And when you're out there in a, something the size of this couch.
Yeah.
And then you're caught, and it's somehow breaking or feathering or whatever it's doing. I mean,
Yeah.
Pass.
But not really. I mean, I feel like you've kind of been like...
I play with fire a little bit, but I wouldn't do ocean rowing. That one, I feel like that one's out for me.
Right.
I think Angela was trying to really hard to bring me into the dark side, and I'm good.
Right.
Yeah.
What, because you spent a lot of time in Nazaré as well.
Yeah, I lived there. Yeah.
So, I mean, you are like, there's something that's drawing you to these...
The extremes, yeah.
To the extremes,
totally.
Yeah. What was it? What did you get out of your experience at Nazaré?
Kyle and I met actually at a big wave spot called Isla Todos Santos off the coast of Ensenada. And since that experience, I have been very obsessed. Well, before that, but a personal, mission of mine is to see as many big wave spots around the world, and Nazare was very high on the list. And I have family in Portugal, and
we were doing a cleanup at Todos.
Yeah.
Boat had crashed out there, so we were.
And it's an incredible wave, incredible spot, beautiful island and lighthouse and everything. So a lot of these big wave corridors in the world have this like mythology and this lore to it, and there's this old world variable, and just something about the way the ocean wakes up and takes over is so cool. And I'm really just drawn to it. And there's something in that feels very creatively inspiring for me. And so in 2020, I moved to Nazare and spent a winter season there. And what did I get out of the experience? Oh my gosh. It was an extremely intense chapter of my life. I was supposed to go to kind of tap out of everything and have some personal therapy. It wound up being a very complex series of challenges. Part of that, if I go there, is my relationship toward extreme sports and extreme athletes, which is given, my relationship to Angela and my love for these kinds of stories and people and my obsession with it. In fact, a heavily romanticized outlook on, wow, people who push the envelope, who are these like 1% of the 1% of athletes and show us what the human body can actually do. Not the body, but the mind really more than anything else. But when I got to Nazare, I had a really different taste in my mouth because I was just coming off a very real tragedy. And when it came time to this first big swell that came through in October, it was like 60, 70, 80 feet. I'd never seen a wave that big. The largest I'd seen Todos was like 20, 30. And that is beyond comprehension when you're looking at it as it continues to get bigger. And the scale of the surfers and the jet skis and how puny they were against these faces. And I just so happened to be dating one of them and, was in love with this person. And suddenly, like, my throat is in my stomach or whatever body part's somewhere else. And I'm super stressed out because this isn't that interesting anymore for me to watch. It actually feels really foolish. And I didn't understand. It just felt very like superficial to me in the moment. And it felt very reckless and selfish and inconsiderate of what, if I have to endure losing you and watching you die, drown right here in front of me in this gladiator setting with 2,000 people despite the COVID lockdown, I have to live with that. And I am living with that right now. I just am enduring this grief of losing someone in such a dramatic way. So something totally switched for me in that experience where I can't say I don't care. I still really do care and love big wave surfing. I just didn't idolize it like I used to. How do you feel about this? What's your perspective?
I think that I had a chance to take a trip with Paige Alms. Not too long ago.
To Nazare?
No, we were up in Canada.
Great.
We took a really fun wave trip to Canada. And Paige is one of the best female big wave surfers in the world.
Yeah.
And she said, she said, I told me, she's like, I mentor some younger big wave surfers, females, and I always tell them, this needs to remain a really personal pursuit.
Amen.
And I think it's simple to say, but I think it's hard to do, especially when you start to be idolized as a big wave surfer.
Exactly.
Fame is a drug.
It is.
And social media makes everyone feel like they're kind of famous.
Yep.
Even if they're not.
Yep.
You could be famous and broke now. And I think it's really easy if people aren't careful to get a little too far over their skis, so to speak.
Totally.
And get intoxicated by that. And then they start making decisions that are they're just being more reckless, and you can get away with it a lot of the times. So when you get away with it, then you feel like, fuck, I'm lucky I can't die.
Yeah. Just Russian roulette.
And it's Russian roulette, and you can do it. You could do it for a whole career, and it could not happen to you. There are certain sports where it's inherently more dangerous, right? Like I know a wingsuiter who has like a dozen friends who have died, right? Like those numbers aren't the same in big wave surfing. So I do think it's inherently a bit safer for sure than other sports like wingsuiting. But I just think that you need to check in with yourself quite often to make sure that it's continuing to be personal for you.
Yeah.
That's always really stuck with me. And it's also, the idea of being like, and how that shows up, I think, is like, I had a really great big wave mentor. Like my two guys that I really learned from were Tyler Fox and Greg Long.
Amazing.
Tyler, early on, he was the first guy who gave me a big wave board. We started training together. Tyler's a super talented Santa Cruz pro surfer, probably the best goofy footer to ever surf Mavericks, was nominated for biggest wave of the year at Ghost Trees multiple years in a row. And there were, we started training together. Like I sought him out and said, I want to learn how to do this. We ended up then living together. So it was really easy for us to like go out and do that training together. But there were multiple times when we would go up to Mavs and we go up and we look out at the bluff, and there's a grave there where Sion Malowski has his grave like right on the bluff there. And it'd be super foggy and really sketchy, and he'd be like, this just doesn't feel like a day that we should do this, and I would always be like, really, like, I think we need to do this. But I looking back, like, man, I really appreciate having that kind of mentorship to have someone who I think is such a badass say, hey, let's not do it today, was really important for me at that time, because I think you can also get in with crews that are just like, fuck it, YOLO. And it's just like, it's the energy of the crew where all of a sudden you're feeling peer pressured to go out into conditions that you don't feel comfortable going out into, right? So I've always just really appreciated that I had that someone who was well balanced in their approach. And I always felt like he kept his ego in check.
That's amazing. Yeah, that restraint to exhibit is so fundamentally respectful of what the limits are. Yeah. And Greg, I feel like, is a very similar surfer as well. He's so methodic and patient, and I think that says a lot. His posture in the water. I love watching him surf and how intentional he is when he does pick a wave. I mean, there's a lot of restraint that he exhibits in a session. And I mean, that tells you a lot of the maturity level, I think, where you get to. And you've seen enough at that point too, of like, do I need to take every wave and then potentially paralyze myself, or just for what? To prove to who, that I can surf this? Yeah.
It's a paradoxical thing, because I think that the paradox is you want to manage everything that you can, but then once you decide to do it, it needs to be full send. Like the second you're I don't want to do that, no, like then you're fucked. So there is this switch in the mindset where you're like, okay, this is a good day, I feel like I've set up everything I can, and now like, let's fucking do this. Like that then needs to be the energy that you're bringing out there, and you're like, I don't give a fuck, I will absolutely go on this wave. Yeah, that makes sense. You can't hesitate. You can't hesitate once you're out there. So you need to flip a switch. Totally. And that's why, like, a lot of big wave surfers fucking go in and rage afterwards, because they don't flip the switch off, right? I mean, you asked me about Nazare. It's true. It's a high. I mean, it's crazy. The ritual after every surf was to go and smoke weed and just calm the body down. I mean, it's crazy, the high that they're on. It's like so much adrenaline. I didn't surf anything, but you're right there with it. I mean, I was just on jet skis a couple times, and I like thought I was gonna throw up my heart out of my throat. Like it was
It's so cool. Nothing is like it.
Oh, it's the shit.
It's amazing. It's amazing. But yeah, your body like needs to be calmed down afterwards. It's such an extreme. I have nothing else to compare it to in my life. Yeah.
I think that the final thing I'll say about that is it's really healthy to diversify your identity. So if all anyone says about you is, oh yeah, they're this wingsuiter, they're the most badass wingsuiter, you should see this cathedral that they flew through at a couple hundred miles an hour, it's going to be really hard for you to go be a graphic designer, right? It's just not cool, and you'll do something recklessly until you shouldn't be doing it anymore. Whether it be financially or whether it be for your own physical limits, like the smartest people I know are really good at having multiple things that they try and get good at. Because then you can, if you start to fail at this one thing, or if you sit out a big wingsuit session or whatever like that, you can still feel like you have value, and it allows you to continue to make more sober decisions. But I mean, I always say, like, fuck Mark Zuckerberg, because Instagram just makes it that much harder for people to diversify their personalities. Right? And you
reinforce an identity.
And you ossify this past self. I mean, I don't think that he was going for this when he was creating Instagram, but that's what it did to the world. It made us way more one-dimensional, way more focused on this like one thing, whether you're like the twerking girl or the wingsuiting guy, you don't feel the permission to go out and try new things and diversify that personality and learn about how varied and wonderful and dynamic the world is. And you get to then bring those skills back to your thing, and you have more appreciation for it. There's this over familiarity that people have now. I think it's a cultural epidemic of over familiarity because they don't feel permission to go out and try the other thing because they won't be immediately validated for it.
That's a huge loss, because I think so much of our purpose of our time here on Earth is to really find our own authentic code. And the more that gets encouraged and rewarded, I mean, it's intrinsically rewarded. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a really, apt observation of the oversimplification of social media, and that it reinforces just a specific reward system, essentially. I mean, that is super unfortunate. I mean, have you combated that in any way?
Moved out of Santa Cruz.
Moved out of Santa Cruz.
I mean, I love Santa Cruz is my hometown, always will be. And making friends with different people, doing this podcast. I think that it's beyond just validation for the sexy thing. Life becomes artificially narrow if you don't actively fight against that. All right, if you get a job, you're in one of the rare positions where you get paid to find interesting new stories. Most people get good at one thing at one company. They interact with the same few people, and then they wake up 5 years later, and they're like, fuck, I don't really have any more friends. I've only been thinking about this one thing for the last 5 years. Oh, shit. And that's what leads to a midlife crisis. So I think I've been really conscious of ways that I can force myself to keep that aperture open. And that's, I mean, I'd do this shit if no one was listening.
People are listening. It's great.
Yeah. That's, you are, what's your hope for this documentary?
My hope. Well, finishing it was enough of a incredible accomplishment, and that really fulfilled a promise I made to someone in the process. It will all be revealed when you get to see it. So I'm very proud, and I want to acknowledge just the present moment in that regard. My hope for the documentary is we hope to get acquired. We're for sale right now. So on a streaming platform of, I mean, who knows, a popular one would be great, because the most number of people that can see this film, I think the story is meaningful. I think the message is meaningful. I think it's entertaining. I think it's a story that actually really touches a nerve with. It's a very American story. Like it's kind of a one size fits all film in a way. Like I don't know a lot of people that will watch it and hate it. I don't know. I'll be curious. Just reach out to me what you don't like. But there's something about Angela's story that's so appropriate for like the American playbook in a way, right? She's a hero, and then I would really like to be in a position after this documentary has its life to do a scripted adaptation, because I felt very limited in many ways by the constraints of the documentary form, which I love and I live in, and it's my bread and butter. But there were a lot of elements of Angela's story that, by virtue of not having archival material to implement, we were not able to go there. And so I would really love to challenge myself and enter into a more scripted storytelling world, only because I'm drawn to it through certain, I think a story finds its right tool, you know, whether it's a book or a podcast or a doc or whatever. In this case, I think her backstory in the 1970s in the Marine Corps, like a period piece with that, would feel really cool as a scripted film. So I just hope this lays a really beautiful foundation. I hope people are moved by Angela. First and foremost, I hope that carries weight, and then see what doors it opens for me of what I get to do next as well.
Yeah. You did a couple things in this doc that I when I thought, I was like, oh, that's nice, and rare. And one is that you're touching on a couple big cultural issues. Gay rights.
Sure.
Veterans treatment.
Yep.
Disability community. And I didn't feel annoyed at you.
Good. I'm glad.
Which is really rare, right? Like a lot of people who are very well-intentioned, normally right out of college and super passionate about making the world a better place,
the self-righteous tone,
lose the perspective that they still need to be persuasive.
Yes.
And that someone...
Aptly put.
Yeah, well, attention is a gift.
Yes.
And I get to tune you out whenever I want.
Yes.
So...
Yes.
Don't annoy me.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I found that you were conscious of that.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it made me like, I felt like, oh, I care more about all of these movements now, which is the best thing that you could.
Right.
I mean, I hope I wasn't going from like, fuck these people to like,
yeah,
goddamn,
really,
she's cool.
Yeah, come off as that person.
Yeah.
Bigoted, close-minded.
Yeah, exactly. But like, fucking people in their wheelchairs, who do they think they are?
Get out of the way.
Get out of the way. Yeah. But Angela's cool. Yeah. But no, I mean, you infected my brain with those plights.
Sure.
Right? Which is all what you can hope to do.
Totally.
How are you conscious of that dance?
Yeah, thanks for this question. I'm really glad you felt that and observed it as such, because it totally was intentional. And I think it had a lot to do with when I met Angela, I wanted to make a sports doc. I didn't want to make a social justice film. It just so happened that she was this amalgamation of all these, you know, oppressed groups, so to speak, even though I hesitate to use that word, because I mean, it's true, but she's just so much more than that. She's so much more than any label. And I wanted to know, I think the priority was rooting for a woman of any ability, disability, background, race, whatever, to get across an ocean, a lot of us can get behind that. That's a human cause. Like, we are all...
I can get behind a human trying to get across that ocean.
That's an incredible thing to do.
Yeah.
And so let's start there, where you really find the common ground. And then from there, I think she made it easy and in revealing her personality in such a way that felt relatable, non-threatening, lovely. Comedy, dude, is the secret sauce. Comedy will heal our earth. It's just the way we can have the most difficult conversations and meet at the same table and feel okay. Everyone can feel welcome. And I think Angela does a really good job of naturally embedding, that comment about her being gay, or like her dad wouldn't teach her car mechanics, so she had to teach herself because they didn't want her to be gay. And then she starts laughing, and it's hilarious. Yeah. Like, it's so funny. And I mean, she's just a normal person getting on with her day like anyone else. And I think that's the tone we wanted to start with. Normal person, with this extraordinary hobby on the side. Yes, she's also these things, but we're not going to highlight anything so outwardly and specific and lecture. Nobody likes a lecture. It's boring. And we already know. Everybody knows. We're in the same, cultural conversations of what's going on. So instead, the more you can just humanize and empathize with someone's context, the less threatening it is to you, right? Yeah. Like, she's just sharing the reality of what her existence on this planet feels like on a day-to-day basis, as a disabled person, as a veteran, as a woman. So to me, that's how we started.
Yeah. I feel like when people make social justice docs and overtly do so, it's like I'm going to a horror movie where the actor turns the camera and says, "This is a horror movie."
100%. Yeah. I don't really watch them. Sorry. I don't. I'm not really into social justice docs. I've seen, many in my lifetime, but I don't outwardly seek them. I'm rarely in the mood when I get home and I know what's going on. Yeah. I follow the news quite closely. I know. And to me, it's so much more sophisticated if a storyteller is able to bring me a human story in my room, in my living room, create a world that I don't get to visit very often, and just take me there. And I don't need a lecture on the way. I just need to be there, and I'm a smart enough person with an emotional spectrum and my own life experiences to reference, to compare notes with what's going on. And I think some of the strongest films do that very well. And I was just hoping to accomplish that with Row of Life. So it's really good to hear that that's how it landed for you, because it took a long time to get there.
Yeah. And I'm super sexist and hate people with wheelchairs. So you got me.
Target audience.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Hook, line, and sinker.
I'm ready for it. Well, I don't say this lightly, but I really, and I'm glad that you're staying present with where you are right now. It's really easy to just be like, more. What's the big next thing? But I think the doc's good enough that your life is going to change.
Oh my gosh, we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, I'm serious. That, it was really well done.
Thank you.
Really well done.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
Where can people see it?
So it premieres this Sunday at the Santa Barbara Film Festival. It will have 3 showings there, and then it's going on a huge film tour. So we'll do, basically it's playing the festival circuit. So a great way to see it is to pay attention to where we're screening, and if we come near a town that you live in. Okay. So it'll also play in 180 cities in Europe. So if you have a European audience, they should follow that.
Where can they find all these screenings?
So on Instagram, we'll post it all there, Row of Life.
Okay.
It's ROW of Life. And then on the website, we will update each announcement of a film festival. So we'll just keep playing as many festivals and do as many screenings and events as we can until the film eventually sells to a streamer. And then one day it will be on your iPhone or computer screen to watch at home.
Okay. And you're rowoflife.com?
rowoflifefilm.com and Row of Life on Instagram.
This was so much fun.
Thank you so much.
Great pod.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.